with. But I want to share with you a little story about another part of our brain, sometimes called the limbic brain. I was sitting in my office one day. My wife and I, Cindy, we live on the border of a national forest in southwest Virginia. We are very blessed. We live in a beautiful place in the world. Behind us there are thousands of acres of forest land that presumably will never be developed. And in that forest, that deep ecology, there are all kinds of plants and animals and birds, insects. It's an incredible place. We have black bear and white-tailed deer. We have box turtles and flying squirrels. We have pileated woodpeckers that have been showing up over the last 4 or 5 years. A mother and her 2 adolescent sons, it seems. The boys are huge. Sometimes I hear them knocking their head against a tree, and I look up and I think my dog is up there momentarily because they're huge birds. Red plumes, they're Woody the woodpeckers, and they cackle sometimes in a way that reminds me of that old cartoon. There are Luna moths that come in May and June, these green luminescent moths that are the size of baseball mitts. And mushrooms one day aren't on the forest floor, but a soft rain will come and they will appear in the hundreds and thousands a foot off the ground. It's just an extraordinary place where we live. And my office, as I mentioned, is in my house. And one day I was sitting at my computer, I don't know, doing email, doing something. And I turned and there was a shape in my office door. And that shape came through my eyes and went down 2 passageways at lightning-like speed. And though it was going at lightning-like speed in both passageways, in one it was going almost twice as fast as the other, and it hit a region of my brain called the limbic brain. Sometimes, a more modern term for this, or more current term for this, is the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, but it takes too long to say sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, so I'm going to leave it at the old term, the limbic brain. It's a really remarkable and old region of our brain. It's been around for a long, long time, long before the prefrontal cortex came. We had the limbic brain. And it's doing all kinds of things for you and me right now that we don't have to think about. We don't have to direct our conscious attention to. In fact, it's all automatic. The limbic brain, for example, it's telling your heart how fast to beat now. You don't have to sit in your chair and go beat, heart, beat, heart, beat, heart, beat, heart, because your limbic brain takes care of that for you. It's adjusting your core and skin temperature to adjust to the temperature of the air around you. It's even adjusting your internal core body pressure based on the changing air pressure around you. When you leave this building and go outside, the air pressure around you will change quite a bit, and your body's internal body pressure will change in response to it, and you won't have to think twice about it. It'll be done for you by your limbic brain. It's a little like, the operating system of a computer that's working in the background that fragments files and puts them in different places on your hard drive or checks for viruses. You can be doing your work and not have to think at all about all that work that's going on behind the scenes. It's kind of like the operating system of the body. But the limbic brain is also that part of our brain that helps us to respond to threat with that freeze, flight, or fight mechanism. You have heard of this, haven't you? And when that shape came through my head, through my eyes, it got separated into that pathway and hit my limbic brain, I interpreted that shape as a black bear. There was a black bear in my office door, and my body changed instantaneously. Before I could even blink my eyes, for example, my hypothalamus and pituitary gland in concert sent these powerful hormonal protein signals through my body that changed the landscape of my body. Among other things, my adrenal glands started to release chemicals that are designed to help me access proteins and sugars that are stored throughout my body, to give me the energy and strength I would need to deal with this predator. And to get those chemicals to those parts of the body where the food is stored, my heart rate increased dramatically so the blood would flow throughout my system. To burn that energy efficiently, it needs oxygen, so my intake of oxygen increased dramatically. Blood flowed from my feet and my hands into my body cavity where it most be needed by my vital organs. Another adaptive function of this is if that bear is to bite me on my arm or my legs as I'm trying to escape, it's best I not have a lot of blood there that I can lose real rapidly. The lining of my stomach became smooth. In the blink of an eye, the lining of my stomach became smooth and stopped digesting food, because the last thing you need to do when there's a bear in your office door is to finish digesting your breakfast. My hearing shut down. One of the first casualties when our limbic systems have been activated is we lose our ability to process sound. Ever been with someone who's really upset, who doesn't seem to listen to a word you're saying? There's a really good chance they can't hear a word you're saying, because when the limbic system is activated, it shuts down our ability to process sound. My hearing shut down because my brain, body complex to go and can't afford to pay attention to anything we don't need to pay attention to. I got tunnel vision with that bear in my office door. I lost the use of my peripheral vision. In some ways, our senses are sharpened, heightened. You can't see very well. You'll get 20/20 vision when there's a bear in your office door, but it'll be tunnel vision. You lose the use of your peripheral vision. The same reason. Don't pay attention to anything you don't absolutely need to pay attention to, and it all happens in the blink of an eye. But for one other reason, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. What I mean to say is, for reasons that are obvious, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. It's too calorie hungry a consumer. The body-mind complex goes, this thing on the top of your head processes maybe 40 bits of information, takes a huge number of calories. A quarter of the calories we burn all day are burned by our brains. A significant portion of those calories are burned by the prefrontal cortex, which can only process 40 bits of information. The visual center, the rest of the brain, can process 11 million bits of information, take relatively fewer calories. So when push comes to shove and you need every calorie you can, your thinking brain shuts down. At about that time, all that was happening. That signal that had been separated into that second channel, going at lightning-like speed in my brain, it caught up to my thinking brain and said, that's not a black bear, you fool. That's your lovely wife, Cindy. And I turned her and I went, oh my God, Cindy, you gave me a fright. And my wife, Cindy, who's a tiny blonde-haired person, she's standing in the door going, what? I go, oh my God, I thought you were a bear. What are you doing coming in here? You almost gave me a heart attack. And one thing to notice about this is that I was angry at my wife, Cindy. Ever happen to you? Somebody startles you? And even though you know they don't mean to startle you, you can't stop being mad at them. Why? This is really important to know if you're helping people who have problem behaviors, because aggression is a normal response to threat. We are programmed to be aggressive in the face of threat. Makes sense, doesn't it, that if there's a bear in your office door, you might have to be ready to fight. We're programmed to do it. I fussed at Cindy. Even though I knew she didn't mean to startle me, I couldn't stop fussing at her. For goodness sake, Cindy, when you're walking around the house, wear bells on your feet. Would you? You could have given me a heart attack. And my wife, she's not taking this personally. She's like, baby, now you need to take a chill pill. I'll go make you some green tea, for goodness sakes. You know, she knew I wouldn't take a chill pill. I know in this profession that's a joke that a lot of people don't appreciate, and apparently that's true in this room too. What happened next is my hypothalamus and pituitary gland, among other things, started what's called the allostatic adjustment. This is a process that is designed to help return the body to a sense of status, norm. It's a chemical correction. After the limbic system's been activated, it's a chemical correction to calm things down. It's the equivalent of my brain saying to the rest of my body, false alarm, the fool thought it was a bear, it was Cindy, calm all systems down. The allostatic adjustment. It takes time and energy to go through the allostatic adjustment. Chemicals are literally released into the bloodstream designed to correct things, to, among other things, get certain chemicals out of the bloodstream that need to be flushed out of the bloodstream that are really helpful when you're under a lot of stress. Things like cortisol and adrenaline are common ones. But they, while they're helpful in a really key moment like that, are not very helpful over time, and so the body has to flush them out. For 20 minutes or so, I paced around my office. I couldn't sit still. I'm embarrassed to say it, but a couple of times I went over to the place where Cindy had been standing and looked to see if there was any bear saliva over there, because I still couldn't quite reconcile what I thought I had seen and what I did see. But I couldn't sit still. It makes sense, doesn't it, that we'd have a huge charge of energy in our body when the limbic system's activated. You know anybody who has a huge charge of energy in their body? They can't stop moving around. They're moving all the time. It could be because they're on the edge of their limbic brain. You know anybody who's aggressive? It could be because they're on the edge of their limbic brain. It's a normal response. One of the leading causes of aggression is activation of this threat mechanism. It's the perception of threat or real threat that makes people aggressive. They're programmed to. It's millions of years old. Know anybody doesn't seem to listen to you when you're talking? Good chance they've lost their hearing, and it all happens in the blink of an eye. I paced in my office. Eventually, I sat back down at my computer and tried to get back to my work, but I couldn't read. I remember looking at my computer screen, and I knew that there were words on the computer screen, but I couldn't decipher the words. Why? Because my thinking brain, my language brain, is designed to shut down in the presence of threat. It's kind of like having all the information on your laptop computer and you turn it off. You know the information's still there, but you've got to reboot the thing in order to get access to the information. In the same way, you have to go through this allostatic adjustment to return to the brain that helps you process language. The prefrontal cortex and the Broca regions of your brain have to get kind of fired up again, among other things, to get you to be able to read. I couldn't read. My wife Cindy, one time she lived in Texas, she went through an intersection and someone ran a red light and hit her from behind. It was one of those kind of accidents where neither person was hurt, but had that car come a second earlier or a second later, it could have been serious harm to both drivers. As it was, there was a lot of damage to both cars, and Cindy remembers sitting in the intersection facing a direction she had no intention of going. And a police officer came over and knocked on her window and said, "Ma'am, roll down your window." Cindy said he had to tell me what to do. I didn't know what to do. She said, I rolled down my window and the police officer asked me, "What's your name, ma'am? What's your name?" And she said, I looked at this police officer and for the life of me, I could not remember my own name. She said, I knew I had a name, but I could not, in that moment in time, remember what my own name was. Why? Her limbic system had been activated. The prefrontal cortex, which processes language, the names of things, shut down. My bet is there's people in this room who remember being in school and having test phobia. You study really hard for a test, and the teacher will put the test down in front of you, and you draw the proverbial blank. What's happening? The test is the threat condition. It activates the limbic brain, the prefrontal cortex, where your information is stored, that helps you access information that is stored. It shuts down. You draw the proverbial blank. Later, the teacher will say to the student, "Honey, I know you studied really hard for the test," and the student will not be able to explain why they couldn't remember what the answers were. The student, in many cases, is lucky they could even read the actual question. And then the teacher will ask the kid questions from the test, and the kid will actually be able to accurately respond to the questions. Why? Because the threat condition's gone, and they're still in the region of the brain that is processing the answers. I think a significant number of people who experience developmental disabilities or cognitive disabilities, that is the central problem for them. They're on the edge of their limbic brain on a good day, and anyone who's on the edge of their limbic brain is going to have problems processing information through the Goldilocks brain. It isn't that their brains don't work, it's that none of our brains work when we're on the edge of this limbic system or it's been activated. You've seen that television show, The Tonight Show, where Jay Leno brings cameras out into the community and points them in front of someone and asks them questions like, who's buried in Grant's tomb? And they say something like, Ronald Reagan, and everyone laughs, making everybody think Americans are getting dumber, which I honestly think you can make an argument for. But you put a camera in front of someone's face with a celebrity behind them and tell me what's going to happen. Their limbic system's going to get activated. Happened to many people in this room. It's a parlor trick. It's a trick that knows physiologically how people will change when you present them with threat. Well, after 20 minutes or so, I finally calmed down and returned to my email. But imagine this. Imagine that 20 years ago, I got attacked by a black bear. Now, it didn't happen, but imagine if it did happen, how terrifying such an event would be. You know, on our mountain, the black bear, the eastern black bear, if it comes after you, it wants to eat you. It's nothing personal, but it's got to accumulate a lot of calories to maintain its body weight. The males can weigh 600 or more pounds. You got to eat a lot of calories every day to keep your body weight at 600 pounds. And a lot of what they're eating are grubs and berries and things. They're hungry. It's not just to maintain their body weight, though. It's also to gain some weight so when they go into the den in the winter, they'll have fuel to burn off. So they're hungry. And if they come after you, they want to eat you. It's nothing personal. They just need the calories. This is different than the western brown bear, which is largely about territory. You know, a grizzly comes after you, and the grizzly, it just wants to make sure you're not going to interfere with its territory. They say what you're supposed to do is get down in the fetal position, and a grizzly bear will kick you around like you're a soccer ball for a while, but it might leave you alone. It might leave you alone. The eastern black bear, this would be bad advice for. You get down in the fetal position with the eastern black bear, it's going to go, well, it doesn't get any easier than this. It's like a butterball turkey. You know, where's my salt and pepper, right? They say with the eastern black bear, you're supposed to punch it in the nose and poke it in the eyes, you know. Imagine, I can't even beat up my older brother, let alone beat up a 600-pound animal that wants to beat me. But imagine if that were to happen and somehow I were to escape, how terrifying such an event would be. Not hard, is it? Imagine the stitches I would need, the antibiotics I would need to take. Imagine the therapy. And now imagine 20 years after such an event, I'm sitting in my chair doing my email, and Cindy walks into my office door, and that shape goes through my eyes and then is separated into two passageways. One faster than the other hits my limbic system. How long do you think it's going to be before I calm down this time? Well, in all likelihood, after such an event, it would take hours. It might take days. The reason I tell you about this is because I think a significant number of people who use our services, maybe a significant number of the people you know who you came here today thinking about, are people who experience a thing called post-traumatic stress disorder because they've gone through traumatic events in their life that are no less threatening than an attack by a black bear. What we know now is separation from your primary relationships is a major trauma to a highly social being with a highly social brain. Being separated from your people will cause you to be very distressed. It is a major, major traumatic event, not small, but large. Remember Eisenberger's study, how we feel these things in our body. Being left out hurts. I believe that one of the bigger distressors for people that experience mental health issues or perhaps something like Alzheimer's, whatever it might be, is that their social brain is realizing that this being's ability to connect to pack is being impaired by this process, and that's the source of most panic for people. It's why people respond this way. A researcher in England said, why is it that people who have delusional thought patterns, they're almost always distressed by their delusional thought patterns? Why wouldn't it be that people would have wonderful delusions that just make them happy all the time? He believes that one of the reasons is because the delusion itself separates you from your ability to connect with the people around you, and that puts the brain, the highly social brain, into a hyper state of alert. I think a significant number of people who use our services have a thing called post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result not only of trauma like separation from relationships, but bad things happen to them. Sometimes they were living with people that hurt them, or the people that were supposed to provide support hurt them. Sometimes it was our procedures. I engaged in behavioral procedures when I first started in this field that I look back on now and realize were nothing but abuse. Putting people in timeout rooms and seclusion. We used to spray kids who experienced autism with water in the face when they exhibited self-stimulatory behavior, put ammonia tablets under their nose. I look back on those days, I did those things, I'm totally ashamed of myself. But we had human rights committees that approved them. research articles that said it was okay. In the United States, we were still using cattle prods on people. In the United States, we were still subjecting people to medical procedures in the absence of anesthesia. We know that the rates of sexual and physical abuse towards people who experience disabilities far exceeds the rates of physical and sexual abuse to people who are typical in the population. It's PTSD. If you're interested more on this topic, I'll talk some more today about some of the implications of it. I have a paper on my website called Supporting a Person with Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. You're welcome to download that. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Having people live in congregate environments who are on the edge of their limbic brain, or go to day activity centers when they're on the edge of their limbic brain, is the equivalent of Cindy knowing I had been mauled by a black bear, walking around the house from time to time growling just to freak me out. Brrr, baby, I'm messing with ya. Jeez, honey. Gosh, calm down. Jeez. Take things so seriously. Goodness. Or putting silhouettes of bear up in the window from time to time just to freak me out. Well, you don't do it. But that's exactly what our system's been doing for years. We congregate people together according to some characteristic. When you understand the physiology of it, you realize it's not only wrong, it's unethical.